Guys, I'm old. And as a certified old person, I can confirm that there's a lot of marketing designed to pander to my nostalgia. It's almost kind of funny how much we simultaneously demand for our nostalgia to be pandered to, while also stigmatizing it.
This game needs a remake, and this show needs a revival, and this old movie needs a sequel, and this animation needs a live-action adaptation.
People will complain about it, but then immediately turn around on it as soon as something they like comes out. Nostalgia bad unless it's something I wanted, I guess. Though this isn't anything new, I've been seeing this happen for years. The only thing that's really changed is the frequency we see them pop up, because the film industry is richer now, everyone has the internet now, and most people except me are subscribed to some sort of streaming service now. I've already made a whole separate video on this topic. While there are many different examples I could point to in just video games alone, there's one game in particular that I think effectively embodies the whole concept. You guys read the title, this video is about Kingdom Hearts. You see, the difference between most nostalgia-targeted marketing and this game is how it's handled. Most remakes, reboots, revivals, etc. largely just expand on or rehash an already existing thing. Or ruin it, but that's a discussion beyond the scope of this video. It's not often that something so overtly derivative, even sort of wearing it proudly on its sleeve, would result in such a weirdly novel idea. Kingdom Hearts only feels normal now because of how long it's been around, and how well it's established itself as a franchise. But back when the series first started, I bet you would have never thought of this. Like, no one just sits down on a Saturday night and thinks, hey, you know what these Disney movies are missing? Final Fantasy characters. And a deep dive on the human psyche. In fact, the story was originally going to be way more basic. The Disney princesses would be held captive, all the princes would team up, and the game would end after you kill Maleficent. Thank God that is not what we got. Executive producer Hironobu Sakaguchi stressed that the project would be a failure if the story didn't match up to the standards of Final Fantasy storytelling. I want everyone watching this to thank Sakaguchi-san right now. Everyone say thank you, Mr. Sakaguchi. I don't care if you say it out loud to your screen, type it in the comments, or text it to your parents out of context. Just fucking say it! Okay, good. Kingdom Hearts is such a weird anomaly that manages to feel unique despite being composed of so many derivative elements, many of which are, in fact, nostalgic in nature. It wouldn't come as a surprise to me if many of you watching this are able to associate many of the game's aspects with certain memories from your childhood, both good and some bad. Stuff like this is what truly keeps us drawn to games like these, and what makes them so universally appealing. Now, for full disclosure, I didn't grow up with this game. I had the original Xbox growing up, so I wasn't able to enjoy any of those sweet PS2 RPGs until around the time I started college. I finally had a laptop that could handle PS2 emulation. At the time, at least. Piece of junk is useless to me now. Tangent aside, I do still have nostalgic memories associated with this series. I read the manga, which is a whole other story for another video, and I played both Chain of Memories and Recoded in my middle school years. I may not remember the films themselves that well, but I did recognize all the Disney movies that were adapted, at least in the first game. But time's gone by so fast that nowadays I even start to feel nostalgic for my early college days too. Yeah, I'm that old. In all truth, this video is not about my nostalgia towards Kingdom Hearts, but rather the nostalgic memories and feelings I'm reminded of when playing this game, as well as the surprising amount of depth and mature themes that still appeal to me as an adult. I think we can all agree that a feeling from our childhoods that we will never forget is our excitement for adventure. That's why I think the setup for Kingdom Hearts is so genius. Alright, let's start from the beginning. Wait, no, not there. I mean even further back. Going on a journey, whether in-game or IRL, is a commitment. And the game makes sure you're ready for that commitment straight out the gate. A mysterious voice immediately forces the player to make a decision. This choice, right here, it's like the equivalent of choosing your starter Pokemon, only the game treats it with a lot more weight. You're not only asked to choose one, but to give up one of the others after. Now, obviously, as children, we don't really have a lot of sacrifices to make, but the way the choices here at the beginning of the game are presented honestly does a good job giving kids a small taste of what real decision making is going to feel like. Sometimes committing to one thing means needing to give up on something else. Imagine you're planning out your day. There are 3 things you could do today, and you realistically only have time to do 2 of them. Obviously, you're gonna choose one of those things to prioritize for sure. One of the other 2 will simply be secondary, but you will inevitably have to make the decision to drop one. Do I give up time I could be spending outside to start that new game I just got? Or maybe I should put off watching my favorite show or reading that one book to make room for it. Another really nice thing about this sequence is how it's framed. It feels like the game is trying to get a feel for the player by presenting things like your ability path and experience growth rate as personality traits. I always liked when games did that. Reminds me of the personality test at the beginning of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. No matter what choice you make, the game is encouraging of your decisions, but still mentally prepares you for what's to come. And regardless of whether you win the tutorial boss or not, the game still hits you with that sense of helplessness as you get sucked into the void. But even then, the voice is still cheering you on. It's one of the weirdest juxtapositions between comfort and reassurance with hesitation and fear of failure. I'm only realizing now as I'm writing this is literally just the manifestation of decision anxiety, the fear of delving into the unknown. And it's only after you overcome or get that anxiety under control when you can truly begin your journey. I don't plan on dissecting every single world in this game as much as this one, but I absolutely need to stress how many childhood memories I unlocked through this prologue alone. Dude, I fucking loved toy sword fights as a kid. Though, of course, the adults around me would always discourage it because violence. And normally, by the time you reach the age of Sora, your friends have probably grown out of that shit. But god, do I sure wish they didn't. To a kid, this shit looks fucking awesome. You've basically got a whole island playground where you and your friends can sword fight each other all to yourselves. That's like little kid me's dream. Sadly, my friends were not Final Fantasy characters, as much as I wish they were. But a cool small little detail is how they all have their own makeshift weapons. Tidus has the power pole, Selphie uses a jump rope as a whip, and Waka uses a blitzball. Wait, no, that's just his actual weapon. Not everyone got the privilege of having an actual wooden sword like Sora and Riku, so they gotta work with what they got. Sora's the kid with the cooler toys than the rest of his friends, but that never really mattered because you just made it work, right? So yeah, Sora's got it pretty good, and if you were a kid in his shoes, you'd think the same thing. But then your best friend Riku comes up with this idea. Let's leave this all behind and see the real world. These guys are teenagers, so they're kinda at that age where they're starting to outgrow this playground stuff. It always starts with that one friend. You know the one. The one who starts the too cool for Pokemon phase that eventually everyone just adopts, and then you're kinda left alone to enjoy your Pokemon ROM hacks privately. Or is that too oddly specific? But also, they're your best friend, and you want to experience new things with them. Sora doesn't seem too particularly attached to his current life. he literally just goes off without telling his mom. He probably views this as the same thing he and Riku have always done as kids, but on a bigger scale. The adult-sized Krabby Patty, if you will. So I think it's safe to say that Sora was also kind of ready to grow up, like we all tend to feel at some point. Though I think it's pretty obvious that they don't really understand what traveling alone really entails. The provisions you prepare for the trip are 3 tiny-ass sardines, a seagull egg, some drinking water, 3 shrooms to get high on in the middle of the ocean, great idea, and 2 coconuts. Because fuck Riku, I guess he's allergic. The craziest thing is that the seagull egg is probably the biggest part of their rations. That thing is twice the size of the actual seagulls flying around. Let's get into the dynamic of our little friend group here. There are 3 characters to keep in mind: Sora, Kairi, and Riku. For now, let's focus on Sora and Riku. I love the way they set up the rivalry between Sora and Riku. I'm gonna show you the first scene where all 3 of the characters interact. This one scene will sum up their whole rivalry.
Whoa! Give me a break, Kairi.
Sorry, you lazy bum. I knew that I'd find you snoozing down here.
Ow!
Are you still dreaming?
Say, Kairi, what was your hometown like? You know, where you grew up?
I've told you before. I don't remember. But you know, I wouldn't mind going to see it.
I'd like to see it too. Along with any other worlds out there. I want to see them all.
So what are we waiting for?
Hey! Aren't you guys forgetting about me? So, I guess I'm the only one working on the raft.
Ah!
And you're just as lazy as he is.
So you noticed. Okay, we'll finish it together. I'll race you.
Huh?
What? Are you kidding?
Ready? Go!
Did you catch it? The driving force of this whole scene, Sora and Riku's rivalry, and even their motivation for wanting to discover other worlds, is Kairi. The brief exchange between Sora and Kairi about how she doesn't remember where she came from plants the same curiosity Sora and Riku have into the audience. This helps us understand their motivation for prepping for this adventure. The way Riku abruptly butts in and embarrasses Sora, then immediately starts rizzing up Kairi? Damn, that's toxic. Fun fact, the first log you pick up while gathering materials is the same log Riku threw at you in this cutscene. He also has another one right next to him, ready to throw at you. What a dick. It also becomes apparent that Kairi's got these 2 wrapped around her thumb. Whether they realize it or not, the way she challenges them to a race as soon as Riku sits down, and even though they sound a bit annoyed at first, they immediately jump off their asses and sprint as soon as she says go. Kairi's not even trying to keep up, she's just laughing at how easy these 2 are. This illustrates a very clear picture for the rest of Destiny Island's storyline. Sora and Riku are rivals, and Kairi is one of the driving forces of their motivation. I'm honestly impressed with how hard they lean into this rivalry. It might not seem like much if you're only looking at it from a quantitative angle, but it's the little things that add up. The fact the game keeps score between you and Riku with your sparring matches and races is such a good detail. Is it bad that I could see Square removing this score count in a hypothetical remake because it makes the players feel bad? Or is that too pessimistic? But it really does invest the player more in this rivalry. And of course, Sora's friends also love to egg him on about it. Like, even if you did the 1v3 against Tidus, Selphie, and Waka the day before, Tidus gasses up Riku for doing the same thing as if you couldn't. And then he hits you with the stinger.
Well, I guess Kairi can always count on him.
Tidus, get the fuck over here, you little... To anyone who was really rooting for Sora like me, don't worry, it's pretty obvious who Kairi likes better. She teases Sora about taking the raft and leaving without Riku like they're eloping or something.
Damn! This girl's dangerous.
It's never something the game outright states, but it's treated like something the game just expects you to get straight from the start. I want to say more about the mutual feelings between Sora and Kairi, but I think it might be better to save it for Kingdom Hearts 2. For now, I'll just say that I'm glad the game respects our intelligence enough not to overstate it. It's possible that Riku liked her too, but I could also see it being Riku intentionally trying to get under Sora's skin. This scene after the first day of preparations really sells it. Riku makes it a point to tell Kairi that she's the reason he wanted to explore other worlds, while trying to sound all cool. And for a brief moment, you can see the expression on Sora's face. You can tell that bothered him. Then immediately right after, Riku gives you a Palpu fruit and explains the myth of how sharing one with someone is basically the equivalent of a proposal. Then the very next day, he challenges you to a race, saying the winner shares a Palpu with Kairi. Holy shit, Sora, the stakes are really high now. If you don't win this race, Riku's gonna steal your girl. Only for him to play it off as a joke afterwards. Come on, bro, why are you so mad? It's just a prank. It's just a prank, bro. But again, though, it feeds into their rivalry. Ultimately, it doesn't matter if Riku actually liked Kairi or not. He's doing this because it pushes Sora to try harder. And not only that, he pushes Sora to grow up more. That's the other driving force of their rivalry I hinted at earlier. Like that race I just mentioned, Sora only said he wanted to be captain if he won. Bruh. Later on throughout the game, you'll see flashbacks of Sora and Riku, where their relationship feels more or less the same. Riku just wants to grow up, and Sora just wants to have fun. These are both very real and relatable depictions of childhood, but without the overt preachiness that other media tends to fall into. I think the biggest reason for that is because Kingdom Hearts doesn't pit these mindsets against each other, or at least doesn't make it the main conflict of the story. Rather, the story is more concerned with just giving an accurate representation of these clashing personalities, and how they navigate through the real world, because the way you perceive the world will ultimately shape the adventure. I think the most important thing for a game's level design isn't the size or the spectacle, it's the incentive to explore and discover. Large maps potentially leave more room for that, but bigger isn't always better. Not every game has to have a massive world that you can get lost in for hours until you realize you've made zero progress and eventually suffer fatigue. Personal preference, but I like when more focus is put into the finer details. Smaller locales with more hidden areas or unreachable places that are just within sight, but you just can't figure out how to get there. Or maybe things that are just literally in your face, but you need to find a way or find an excuse to get there. The worlds of Kingdom Hearts are compact, but well designed and very effective. I know a good amount of that might just be due to budget restraints, but truly good design choices will shine through in spite of those restraints. Whereas a bigger budget game kinda has the luxury of using its scope to hide or compensate for its shortcomings. While the platforming is really awkward, it's still satisfying to pull off, because in most cases you'll be rewarded with hard-to-reach items or areas you probably wouldn't see otherwise. It's honestly not too different from how we view the world as kids. Like, even small, cramped places can be loads of fun if there are enough deviating paths and tucked-away corners. Some out-of-reach chests are a bit different, where it'd honestly be easier to wait until you have a certain ability later on. But you can still technically reach it if you're precise enough. You also have things like Trinity marks that straight up prevent you from passing until a certain point in the game. And a vast majority of them are optional. Hell, sometimes you just gotta reward the player for inspecting the most random thing, like the pull string in Halloween Town. If you were somehow curious enough to pull it 3 times, you get an elixir. And if you aren't familiar with your RPGs, elixirs are pretty good, or so I've heard at least. There's a lot of wonder and awe to be found in just being able to interact with level environments. Some are definitely better than others, Wonderland isn't a bad world by any means, it's just pretty slow to start the game as one of the first available worlds. A little too easy to get lost and confused in. I get that's the whole point of Wonderland, but it feels a little too early for that in the first set of worlds. And for a lot of people, including myself, it tends to be the first world we visit after Traverse Town. Speaking of which, Traverse Town is a very good little home base world. All your shops are here, and you can even access the gummy menu from here. Oh god, the gummy ship. Please, just hold out a little bit longer before I get to that. Anyways, you come back to this town several times throughout the story, so it makes more sense to put more progress walled areas in this world. The postcards are a nice world exclusive collectible. I only found out recently how to get all 10 of them. I never knew how badly I needed to stand where Donald and Goofy stood in the cutscene before the guard armor fight. I didn't play this game as a kid, but being able to reach these types of isolated areas in other games definitely tickled my brain at that age. There are many examples you could probably think of, but for me personally, Pokemon is just the standout comparison. Mew under the truck, anyone? See, when you think about it, Trinities and movement upgrades like High Jump or Glide are pretty much just HMs. Hell, you can even cast magic on some parts of the environment. They serve a similar capacity, and there's no shortage of areas just begging to be reached that you can't unless you have them. Kingdom Hearts does it better though, because they don't take up move slots. Or rather, ability points in this game, I guess. I've heard some complaints from people that they don't want to use the guest party members because you need Donald and Goofy for Trinities, but something everyone tends to ignore is that after sealing a keyhole, the game doesn't automatically boot you out of the world like in later entries. It actually puts the world in a temporary peaceful state where there are no encounters. The game also switches you back to the default party composition too. This actually makes it easier to backtrack and grab whatever treasures and Trinities you can. Obviously, there are some you'll have to come back for later, and the encounters will return upon revisiting the world. But a good amount of it should still be within reach at this point. While it's not as convenient as in later games where you can switch party members without a save point, it's still a clever design choice. There are countless more examples I could talk about, but the best example I just need to talk about is Hollow Bastion. It takes all the best aspects of the world exploration I mentioned before, and turns it into a long dungeon. Bro, this place sure looks like an endgame dungeon. The game spawns you at the bottom of the waterfalls to give you a view of the place from below. Just the climb up and seeing it from below makes the castle feel imposing. In fact, as soon as you reach the gates, the game doesn't even let you in. You're starting in the sewers, little boy. While the waterway puzzle is extremely straightforward, the thing that really seals the deal for me is being able to freeze the bubbles and use them as platforms. You can reach a hidden chest with this trick. They didn't have to do that, but they did, and it's cool as fuck. They went out of their way to add an extra layer of interaction with this entity. I wish they did more with this, but at the same time, it's because it's such a niche use case that makes the act of figuring it out so cool. But the real fun starts once you actually enter the castle. The library puzzle might just be my favorite part of this world. I mean, what else is gonna make a library interesting? The books? Yeah, that's a good one. The library setting really does just lend itself to dungeon and puzzle material. You could just do the bare minimum, which only requires you to find a couple misplaced books, but doing the full puzzle is the most satisfying feeling. The way the bookshelves overlap and fold into each other is satisfying to watch. It's like how toys with lots of moving parts stimulated our brains as kids. It also appeals to the part of my brain that doesn't like to leave gaps in my fucking bookshelves. Guys, you don't understand. I can't leave this room until volumes 3 and 6 of Mava are in their rightful places. It's like if I went to your house and placed random volumes of Dragon Ball Z in your Season 3 collection of Seinfeld. Would you like that very much? No, so I'm completing this whole book puzzle, damn it. The puzzle also leaves just enough breadcrumbs for you to follow the trail and stay on track. Like this book that's visibly wedged between these bookshelves. the place also just has an overall cozy vibe, which is kind of a big deal in such a dark and dreary castle. I like this desk and chair hiding in the corner behind this bookshelf, revealing one of the last books to solve the puzzle completely. Who was reading it back here? Who misplaced all these books? But anyways, the actual tangible benefit of doing all this is a diverging path that leads to more treasure. You've also got the puzzle right after, where you gotta light candles and push objects for an emblem puzzle. Yo, what is this, some kinda survival horror game? I guess the fixed camera angle in the sunken ship wasn't good enough for them. The rest of the world is an arduous climb to the top, with tougher enemy types than the ones you've encountered in any of the previous worlds. And these guys aren't even the toughest enemies in the game. It's so good that they make you do it twice! While most of it is just that, a climb to the top, I do love this one room tucked behind these elevating platforms. While these are a required part to progress, you can take a leap of faith down there to grab a... Cannot carry any more float G. What? Just kidding, that's only in the original. In Final Mix, it's the Royal Crown. Awesome for magic builds, not so great for your melee damage. Hopefully by now I've drilled it into your heads that encouraging curiosity and incentivizing exploration is good for children. Growing up, I fucking hated hearing adults call video games a waste of time and saying they just rot people's brains. Like, yeah, video games shouldn't be the only thing you do, no shit. But that doesn't mean they can't benefit your child's growth. You wanna know what else is good for your kids? Letting them develop their imaginations. And what better way to encourage imagination than introducing them to the wonderful world of franchise crossovers? So, let's talk about the whole Disney and Final Fantasy thing again. Honestly, that is conceptually the most DeviantArt idea I've ever heard, and it was officially licensed, greenlit, and everything. If that doesn't inspire you to make your own crossover fanfictions, I don't know what will. It's likely part of the reason why this game appealed to the youth at the time, both in and outside the sorta nerd culture sphere. There's probably a good handful of parents who picked up this game assuming it was just a nice family-friendly game to keep their kid busy, but it also appeals to the angsty teenagers who are just starting to explore the darker side of the media they consume. This is also around the time they do start to show interest in crossover fanfiction-y type stuff. And let's be real here, the Final Fantasy part of the marketing is largely what drew the older crowd to this game. At least in theory. Once you actually get into the game, the Final Fantasy representation is pretty light in terms of characters. Most of the Final Fantasy characters serve supportive roles. Hell, none of them even join your party in the first game. It's only after starting the story when your dumb teen brain starts to understand that you can tell mature stories with these kid-friendly properties. The Disney to Square ratio never mattered that much in terms of the story. It's all just a farce that we put on when we're younger to reconcile with the fact that we're playing a game where you relive childhood movies and beat up Disney villains. And you were absolutely relishing in it. You totally developed an attachment to your best friends Donald and Goofy. You're not above kid-friendly franchises, you're not above role-playing and sword-fighting with your friends, you're not above crossover fanfics. There are whole-ass communities for all of those things. Growing up doesn't necessarily mean letting go of all that stuff from your childhood entirely. You can still grow and enjoy new interests. You can like your fantasy drama RPGs like Final Fantasy and still acknowledge that the films you grew up watching are still good in their own right. That's not to downplay Square's role in this game. They did make the game after all. Most of the Final Fantasy elements in the game are less in the direct references and more in the game's systems. When the topic of action RPGs comes up, there's a very likely chance that Kingdom Hearts will eventually come up in the conversation. I think growing up with Pokemon and Final Fantasy on the GBA kinda conditioned me to like menu-based gameplay, while games like Tak 2 made me love beat-em-up combat. So I would always daydream about a game that would blend those two styles of gameplay. Kingdom Hearts implements its RPG elements in the most literal way possible. And honestly, the game ends up being better off for it. Square Enix is probably the only company that implements turn-based command menus in a real-time action setting. Most other action RPGs are just kinda action games with a level-up system and equipment, and there ain't nothing wrong with that. There's just something really admirable in how this game embraces and wears its turn-based influence on its sleeve. There are shortcuts for your normal magic spells, but if you want to use an item or a summon, you gotta scroll through a menu for that shit, and if you can't handle it, skill issue. That's the thing though, just enough of the game's elements are menu-based without it being too cumbersome. There are still some turn-based remnants that keep the spirit of those types of games. Attacking is hack and slash gameplay, but new melee techniques are equipped and automatically modify your combo, rather than relegating them to button combinations. There aren't all that many special attacks with the swordplay, and the ones that do exist are largely just timed button presses with the command menu. You know, I think the thing that really sells it is the speccing and party management aspect of the game, probably one of the most important aspects to any RPG for me personally. See, in my eyes, the correct way to handle an RPG is to make the player lean into a certain build or split the difference. A mistake a lot of RPGs make is that every new piece of equipment is just a straight upgrade in every area that matters, and your stats only amount to a bunch of slowly growing numbers. Boosting strength in exchange for defense or magic is a good start, but giving weapons and accessories secondary effects on top of that really adds an extra layer to consider. It gives almost every piece of equipment their own situational use. Not all of them are made equal, of course, but it still does a good job at this. Would you rather stack a bunch of accessories to strength max or stack more into elemental resistance? Or maybe you're like me and like to stack a shitload of MP for magic. The gameplay also leans into that nostalgic appeal I keep bringing up. A good amount of the good equips in this game are rewarded for completing the game's worlds. You even get a keychain that changes your Keyblade's form and themes it after said world. I do think the clarification that these are accessories for your Keyblade as opposed to an entirely new weapon gives them more sentimental value. The armor accessories are like souvenirs, and the keychains are like little mementos of the places you've visited, the people you've met along the way, the challenges you've conquered. I think it's good to sort of teach the younger player base a sense of sentimental attachment to memories and achievements. I used to not really like taking pictures on trips because my mom would make us take like a billion of them. I also don't really like taking pictures of myself. Even today, I don't really take that many photos, but on occasion, I do pull out my phone to take pictures of nice scenery. And food. And now that I have my own money, I can buy my own souvenirs and mementos now. I can make my own memories. And it feels good. The amount of detail that went into each Keyblade's design, appearance, particle effects, sound effects, stats, and even additional properties like length, crit rate, and crit bonus being taken into account, tells me that they very much wanted every keychain to be memorable. Yes, even the bad ones. We've all used One Winged Angel before just for swag, don't lie to me. It's not a very useful keychain, especially for the point in the game you get it. Rather, it's the moment it represents that gives it value. A common trap a lot of games fall into is making weapons feel samey after a while, or just straight up palette swaps of each other. All of the keychains give the Keyblade completely unique forms. Only a couple of Donald and Goofy's weapons are palette swaps, and those are the generic ones you can buy at the shop. Everything else is completely unique. Okay, so to quickly recap, we just talked about mashing things together, sentimental value, and unique designs. There's actually something in this game that embodies all of those things. Something completely separate from everything I just talked about. Might have gone right under your noses. Yes, I'm serious. The Gummy Ship. Not so much the actual stages, but the ship itself. So that race you have with Riku at the beginning of the game actually does earn you something. Not a Palpu fruit with Kairi, but deciding the name of the raft. Even though you never get to use your raft, the name of that raft actually ends up being the name of your initial gummy ship. So right out the gate, you start off with a little personal touch. While the gummy garage menus feel really awkward to navigate, once you get the hang of it, customizing your ship becomes about as fun as playing with Legos. I've seen tons of other people's ship designs, and the sheer number of shapes they provide you for blocks, wings, cockpits, etc. leaves a ton of creative potential. This right here is my ship. It's not great, but it's mine, and I'm still pretty proud of it. I tried to model mine after the helmet of a dragoon from a classic Final Fantasy game. At first, I went with literal dragon wings on the side, but then modified them to look more like the webbed ear flaps of a dragoon helmet. I tried to make the front look more like a dragon's maw. And by that I just mean adding vaguely fang-shaped blocks to the front. Realistically, you don't need to put much thought into your gummy ship from a stat perspective. Hell, speedruns just run the cockpit, engine, and accelerator. So you really have a lot of free reign to just design your ship however you want. At least if you're playing the game normally. So anyways, thank you all for watching Pimp My Gummy Ship. You guys might be feeling pretty cozy right now. I guess now's a good time to talk about the game's atmosphere. Well, outside of the Disney worlds, which are all just, Disney, a lot of the game's original settings are really colorful and have this ethereal feeling to them. Even the ones that aren't as bright or cheerful still manage to feel really pretty. I wonder if there's a word to describe this.
So, something I don't hear enough people talk about is how Earthbound's psychedelic backgrounds in battle give the game an almost dreamlike feel to it. Like, it's all literally just in your head.
My favorite part of Donkey Kong Bonanza has gotta be its dreamlike atmosphere.
Final Fantasy XVI has a very dreamlike atmosphere because boy, does it sure put me to fucking sleep.
One of the more overlooked JRPGs coming out of 1996 is easily Command & Conquer Red Alert. Compared to its contemporaries, the dreamlike atmosphere of the game's FMVs invoke a very Lynchian response.
I'm just kidding, guys, don't worry. I'm not gonna go on a ramble about how this game has a dreamlike atmosphere or whatever. It actually has a nightmare-like atmosphere. Hey, don't get mad at me now. The game literally starts in a nightmare Sora is having. So, Kingdom Hearts is actually kind of a scary game sometimes. Not in like a shit yourself type of way, I mean in the same way something like Majora's Mask can simultaneously be cozy and genuinely unsettling sometimes. At least for a kid. I'm totally not scared of the Sonic CD secret screen as an adult, no way. But in all seriousness, it's really interesting to think about how there's kind of a whole subculture behind unearthing old, unsettling memories associated with our childhood games. It's wild that we as people can feel nostalgic for that specific type of fear, which is why I want to use this discussion to elaborate on a point I brought up much earlier: the juxtaposition between comfort and terror. Kingdom Hearts really does embody, hell, straight up anthropomorphize the classic fear of the dark. I think what makes it work so well is that the game is very ambiguous on what the darkness is. Even so, the game still gives the player a pretty good reason to fear it. But atmosphere isn't just about the visuals, it's also the audio and the context they're being used in. You ever think about how one of the bosses in this game is literally a ghost that haunts the clock tower, puts a timer on your party members, and literally kills them when it runs out? Or how about in Hollow Bastion when you enter the Grand Hall? If you look around the perimeter, you can see all the princesses in stasis. The lighting on them looks particularly ominous. You can't interact with anything here, it's just something for you to look at. The game never stops to draw your attention to this, even if Beast is in your active party. Instead of stopping the player in their tracks and having Beast say something like, "Oh no, they took Belle's heart," they just leave the player surrounded by what are essentially A bunch of empty husks that used to be conscious people. Yo, you know it's kinda wild that Beast is probably the least scary thing in Hollow Bastion, despite the movie trying to depict him as scary and intimidating. If anything, they do the opposite. When you temporarily lose Donald and Goofy from your party, and the Keyblade, this guy's basically your bodyguard. Would you guys believe me if I said the literal end of the world actually fills me with dread? Right at the start of the world, you got literal encounters falling from the sky, and this is your introduction to the actual toughest enemies in the game. On top of that, the game leaves a trail of breadcrumbs with all these chests laying around. It lulls you into a false sense of security. Until you find out these are spiked with more encounters. You don't know which ones though. Okay, that was a very light example. What about the part where the world terminus gives you the save point from Winnie the Pooh's world to calm your nerves, only to immediately follow up with this dark hallway? Unlike the past rooms you've been going through, this one doesn't seem to be based on anywhere you've been before. Except, you have. You've never been to this specific room, but this is in fact Hollow Bastion. As soon as you walk into the room, you're locked in. There's this very friendly looking machine with what looks like human-sized containment capsules. Examining it will give the player a very unsettling doomsday prophecy. You would assume that Kingdom Hearts, the place the game is named after, would be some type of nirvana, but the game actually describes it as if there's some forbidden evil locked away in it. Opening the gates to this place would basically spell Armageddon, like some sort of Pandora's box. Which actually does appear in this series, but they don't do anything with it. Then the game immediately throws a jump scare encounter at you with some invisibles, which you've already been conditioned to be scared of based on all the other encounters you've had with them up until now. You also fight Chernobog right after. He's not even a Heartless, he's just the devil. This isn't even a Fantasia world or anything like that. Hell, most kids playing this game probably haven't even seen Fantasia. So as far as they're concerned, they're just fighting the Slavic devil for no reason. What the fuck, man? Don't they know this is a children's game? Don't they know that children can't handle being scared, even though we're literally scared by innocent imagery and entertainment all the time? Speaking of which, remember those cave drawings at the beginning of the game? I know this seems random, but I promise this is relevant. If you actually take the time to inspect these wall scribblings, you'll notice that a good amount of them actually foreshadow worlds and events in the story. Look, it's Sora and Riku fighting Parasite Cage. There's Donald Duck. And a Chocobo. Whoa! At the end of the day, these are just a bunch of innocent doodles. Well, right after beating Chernobog, the game once again decides to do something very unnerving. You actually enter through a cave, and not too long after entering, you're shown very bleak imagery of destroyed worlds. To anyone who's played later games in the series, you might recognize some of these environments. It's like a weird amalgamation of Sleeping Beauty and Snow White's worlds. At least, those are the ones that stuck out to me. I always found this interesting because the worlds of 4 of the princesses are not even featured in this game, but they were stated to be destroyed. Well, glad they were nice enough to depict their destruction for us, I guess. I always personally viewed this as a parallel to the cave drawings at the beginning of the game, taking something so pure and corrupting it. But it doesn't stop there. The game continues to up the ante. A couple rooms over, you'll enter the Linked Worlds room. As soon as you enter, you're like, okay, it's just a behemoth, these things are a cakewalk. But then the camera cuts over to the Heartless emblem at the other end of the room, and a piece breaks off. That's when the realization slowly starts to come to you. Oh shit, that was only round 1. You've got 7 more waves of enemies, and they will gang up on you. The constant pressure of having 3 of the worst enemy types to deal with up in your face alongside the tense music is really what does it for me. The game doesn't even clearly indicate how many more enemies you'll have left. The emblem is technically still crumbling bit by bit in the background as you destroy enemies, but the game never makes it a point to convey your progress to you. This really makes it feel like a high-tension endurance test. Hell, even if you do the cheese strat with the Simba summon, there's still quite a bit of pressure. If you're even just a second too slow, if even a single enemy is able to interrupt your charge up, you basically have no hope of getting enough breathing room to get a fully charged attack, which you need for it to even be strong enough to wipe out a whole wave of enemies, by the way. It's only after you defeat that last remaining enemy when the camera cuts back to the emblem, and the sweet relief of that last piece crumbling can finally settle in. And that right there is what Kingdom Hearts is really about, that push and pull. The game isn't afraid to make you feel uncomfortable and put on the pressure, but at the same time, the game lets you know it'll be okay. That's just the reality of life. You'll never know what's lurking in the darkness. You'd probably prefer not to find out, but you will inevitably have to come face to face with it. We've all been taught that what we fear isn't necessarily the darkness, but what horrors lurk within it. It's ultimately rooted in fear of the unknown, a fear we're familiar with as far back as childhood, but never fully outgrow no matter how much older we get. I think the moment that I realized this was during the final boss sequence of this game, specifically the World of Chaos segment. I love these little intermittent pitch black rooms between each phase. For the first few phases, you have to duke it out alone, but when you reach the second pitch black room, Sora! You start to hear the cries of your friends joining you again. It's still pitch black and you still can't see them very well, but just knowing that they're there, it calms your nerves a bit. It's like that feeling of having a stuffed animal to comfort you at night. Guys, is my brain cooked? Have I really gotten to a point where I feel nostalgia for a very specific type of fear, a very specific type of nerd culture, a certain type of RPG or fantasy? Well, no. There's nothing inherently special about any of these things. It's less about the things themselves and more about the memories we associate with them. The feelings these things invoke in us. Things you might not have felt in a really long time. Which is why Kingdom Hearts really is such a good window back into your childhood, whether you grew up playing it or not. I watched a lot of the Disney properties in this game, but honestly didn't quite remember them all too well until I made contact with this franchise. Sure, certain memories started coming back to me, but I was honestly unlocking way more memories of all those other things I just talked about at length. But at the same time, the game has plenty of qualities that appeal to the adult player as well. In fact, I'd argue the game remains just as relatable, hell, even more relatable as you get older. Let's take it all the way back to the beginning. So way earlier in the video, I talked about how the tutorial segment of this game was filled with so much mystique. Well, some of that does go away when you actually know the specifics of what these choices at the beginning mean. I mean, the first one was already kinda straightforward. You probably had a vague sense of what you were asking for. Do you want to prioritize strength, defense, or magic? Well, it affects a little bit more than just that. It actually affects the order that Sora learns all his level up skills. Now I want you to keep in mind that Sora will be learning abilities all the way up until level 100, which takes a long time to reach obviously. So when you take the sheer scale into account, yeah, this will considerably impact the way you play the game. These ability paths are made with specific playstyles in mind, and unlike later games where this only really amounts to passive abilities, with all your active skills being fixed behind game completion, you could very well end up going through most of the game without ever seeing certain game-changing abilities. Then you have the personality questions. These affect your XP growth rate. Top answers push you towards starting your journey at dawn, which means fast early XP and slow late game XP. Middle choices will push you towards starting at midday, meaning average XP growth for the whole game. Bottom choices will push you towards starting at dead of night, meaning slower early game XP but faster late game XP with less XP overall to reach level 100. I don't think I need to tell you this, but midday path is a huge scam. If you're someone who doesn't plan to reach level 100, or doesn't really want to fuck with optional content, you choose Dawn. If you plan on delving deep into the game's content, you go with Dead of Night. If you're someone who plans to dabble a bit in optional content, or maybe you're not blasting through the game like it's an any percent speedrun, guess what? You're still better off choosing Dead of Night, because the point where Night starts to catch up and outpace the other two growth rates is around level 40, which is not only earlier than you were probably expecting, but also well before the end of just the main story content. There is literally no benefit to choosing midday. It only sounds appealing because the idea of average growth all around sounds like less grinding than being a little underleveled for early or late game. So, funnily enough, actually knowing the full extent of these decisions kinda makes them more important. What? You thought this was gonna be the part where I take off the nostalgia goggles and say the game's not as good as I remember? No, it's actually better. Funnily enough, Dead of Night route just happens to align more with my current adult self. As a kid, you probably care more about being number one or friendship. You might be afraid of getting old or being different. But as an adult? Well, I'm already old, and I don't really give a fuck about being different. When you have way more choices and responsibilities to worry about, being indecisive is probably the worst thing you could be, right? That's me, by the way. I'm the indecisive friend who can't decide where to go out for dinner. It's bad. I've already accepted my life of mediocrity, and I'm pretty comfortable with the amount of friends I have, so... yeah, I would like nice things, please. Waka's question is probably the one that aged the best with you. I can see myself realistically going for any of these. But you only need to choose 2 bottom choices to get Dead of Night. One last thing I want to mention about the prologue, since I don't want to spend too much time here again, is the sparring matches. A big disclaimer that I have to give people when they pick up this game for the first time is that these fights are not actually representative of most types of enemies you're going to fight in this game. But why? What purpose do these fights serve then? Well, if you've been paying attention to the footage on screen right now, you might have noticed these little tech points that occur when Sora parries their attacks. This is what these fights are for. They exist to teach the player the benefits of parrying. You can hit projectiles back to stun an enemy or simply create an opening after they recoil. This becomes applicable to fights like Squall where you don't even have to win. But now whenever I play this game, I wanna beat him because I know I can. Look at this guy, he's a chump! And also you get an elixir, that's pretty nice. Okay, but how does this all play into the game at large? Well, it all comes down to playstyles and how they affect the game's replayability. Something I've noticed about myself as I get older is that I have a much easier time getting myself to replay games I've already played than it is for me to start something new and actually finish it. I'm honestly kinda shocked that there are people who just straight up never replay games. I'm all for experiencing more media and trying things outside of your comfort zone. When it comes down to it, I'd rather have 20 games that I could replay infinitely than 1,000 games that I only care enough to play through once. That's not to devalue the majority of games, by the way. You can't realistically expect every game you play to be your new favorite. But to me, a game can't really become my favorite unless there's something that makes me want to come back to it. A truly good game is gonna have that incentive built into it. So originally, I recorded one playthrough of this game, and I was just gonna call it there. But then I actually went back and did several more playthroughs of it, specifically for this talking point. I did 3 playthroughs of Final Mix and 1 playthrough of the vanilla game on PS2. In Final Mix, I went down every ability path. First I did a Guardian playthrough doing the amount of content I usually do, all worlds, all spell upgrades, all super bosses. Then the original game, I chose Mystic route, doing the same amount of content as my last playthrough. Then I returned to Final Mix choosing Mystic, completing Jiminy's Journal, and getting most KH1 related achievements. This includes synth grinding for every item, getting to level 100, and clearing 3 gummy missions for at least one world. Lastly, I did a beginner mode playthrough on Warrior Route, doing the bare minimum amount of content, and getting the last remaining achievements. This was also the only playthrough I didn't choose Dead of Night for XP growth, and opted for Dawn. I was initially afraid I'd get burnt out after just the second playthrough, but I was wrong. Each one of these playthroughs presented a unique experience, and I can say with a full chest that every one of them was worth it. The original game was definitely a lot less varied with its melee combat, so it doesn't have nearly as much replayability as Final Mix. Even so, the foundation the original was built on was still very strong, and they still managed to do a lot right on their first attempt. So let's talk about how different the ability routes are implemented so well. They do more than just slightly push you towards a certain way. No, the abilities feel hand-picked and tailored to suit your desired playstyle. Warrior provides all your best ground combo modifiers earlier, with the main drawbacks being no invincibility frames while healing and no money or item farming abilities until very high levels. Mystic starts you off with a higher max MP value. Higher max MP serves a double purpose, in both allowing for more spellcasting, as well as scaling your magic damage up. You miss out on a lot of ground combo modifiers in exchange for crowd control finishers like Stun Impact and Ripple Drive, the latter of which scales off your magic, which is great for anyone stacking all their equipment into MP. The only major loss is not getting Second Chance, which saves you from lethal attacks as long as you're above 1 HP, until level 90. Though I assume the reason for this is because Mystic also gets their MP regenerative skills early, specifically MP Rage, which restores MP when you take damage. Stacking this with Second Chance would be pretty broken, so I understand why they did it. Guardian provides more safety nets than the other two paths, granting early access to iframes while casting Cure and Second Chance. You also get an extra item slot and abilities for farming money and items earlier. The downside is, it doesn't particularly excel in any areas of combat. You get a weird mix of modifiers and finishers you'd get from both Warrior and Mystic, but they don't mesh all that well together. In exchange for the safety nets, you also get no assistance with MP replenishment until exorbitantly high levels. They force you to use that extra item slot wisely and ration your restorative items. You can't just go wasting all your MP healing yourself back up from 1 HP. Guardian's not really my cup of tea, but all three choices are fairly balanced and distinct from each other. See, a truly good game actually gets better the more you come back to it. Sure, the urge to come back might be rooted in personal attachment, but an initially good impression is not a guarantee you'll enjoy it just as much the next time around. Diminishing returns are a thing, after all. It's only upon further exploring a game where its strengths and weaknesses truly start to show. This is where you truly find out how well a game withstands the test of time. You can get a much better grip on how much of a game's design is intentional versus being experimental just for the sake of it, and most of the mechanics being superfluous. Something you really start to think about more when you replay these types of games is routing your playthrough. If you don't know what that means, it's the order you choose to do things while progressing the game, what order you do the levels in, when you trigger certain flags to get X thing or event. I know the common route most players take is to clear Wonderland, then backtrack all the way to Traverse Town so they can jump to Olympus Coliseum, and then go to Deep Jungle. Keep in mind, this is before you get the Warp Gummy to fast travel to worlds you've already been to. I don't know why so many people insist on doing it this way, but to each their own. Personally, I always go straight to Deep Jungle after Wonderland to get Cure. This makes the preliminaries at the Coliseum more manageable and lets me loop back to the second Traverse Town visit in one round. Also, I have never done the full 5-stage course of Jungle Slider until recently. This shit is gorgeous. You know, despite someone who favors magic in this game, I've been playing the game all wrong up until this point. I usually put off most of the Coliseum Cups until way later, but it wasn't until recently that I found out I was better off doing the Fill Cup as early as possible. Your reward for clearing it is the Gravity spell, whereas ignoring the fill cup means you'd have to wait all the way until Halloween Town to get it. In fact, I think the reason I used to think Agrabah was a huge difficulty spike is because I didn't have gravity for all the fat bandits who are hella weak to it. Although it is still kinda weird how Monstro ends up being way easier no matter what. You know, one of the coolest parts about this game is that it has alternate variants of cutscenes just in case you do everything in a completely wrong order that the game doesn't expect you to. And I mean really out of order. As in, Maleficent will straight up be removed from a cutscene if you defeat her before doing an early game world. Check out these scenes in Monstro if you clear Neverland first. Riku just completely ignores Sora because by the time you've met him in Neverland, the damage is already done. Riku's just kidnapping this puppet to be a dick and troll you. Sora's just straight up in denial that Riku's even there. He's still coming to terms with the fact that Riku might be too far gone at this point. Actually, come to think of it, the later games rarely have any alternate cutscenes aside from losing the tutorials. It really makes you wonder if the reason world plots in later games aren't as involved with the main story is specifically so they don't have to make any alternate variants of these scenes. On one hand, I get all these alternate cutscenes might make the story feel a bit jarring, so I can understand why they'd want to avoid this stuff as much as possible. And yet, I just think it's so cool that it even exists. It's the only thing I didn't do while replaying this game multiple times for this video. Who knows, maybe next time I'll do things in the most out-of-order way possible. Yeah, only in Kingdom Hearts 1, baby. You wanna know something that you do start to outgrow in this game? The complaints about Donald and Goofy. Okay, obligatory rant from the world's biggest defender of AI party members incoming. People will complain about Donald not healing them, while also never doing a damn thing for him ever. People want to have their cake and eat it too, when in reality, it's a give and take relationship. You can either carry the fight yourself and don't rely on them, or you can actually try to manage your party members. Hell, this time around, I made sure to go out of my way to heal party members more often, and always have them equipped with second wind so they revive with way more HP. And, unshockingly, they were more useful to me. I already liked the party members before making this video, but after being more watchful of them and utilizing them better, my appreciation for them has grown even further. Kingdom Hearts 1 has really flexible parameters for party behavior, with nice presets as well as being able to manually tweak them. Honestly, once I found my preferred settings, I rarely had a moment where Donald or Goofy didn't heal me when they could have. These guys can tear through enemies when you spec them right. They are not pushovers. And if you ever get tired of them running out of MP, you can discover the really nice life hack of turning off Goofy's offensive abilities. No, I'm not joking. Having Goofy go all in on his healing and MP recovery skills is a completely valid way to use him. He practically already deals enough damage passively just by running into the enemies with his shield. Any fellow Mystic Path goers, you really ought to start doing this. Sora and Donald's MP will last way longer this way. Apparently, I heard turning up Goofy's MP item usage also increases the frequency of his MP gift ability too. Wild how I've been favoring a magic-focused Sora all these years, but never thought to make everyone in my party more magic-focused too. Hell, I still learn stuff about the bosses in this game even to this day. I remember when I got my friend in college to play this game, he got really stuck on Trickmaster. Like, really stuck. As in, he put the game down for a whole year before picking it back up again and finally beating him. If only I knew back then that you could lock onto the furnace in the corner and cast Blizzard on it. This prevents Trickmaster from lighting up his torches and using any of his fire attacks, making him significantly less threatening. Now I must stress, you have to lock onto the furnace before casting Blizzard, or it won't extinguish it. If you happen to be watching this, by the way, bud, I'm really sorry you had to go through that. I always figured you could skip Oogie Boogie's scripted healing machine, but I think this was the first time I ever bothered summoning Genie just to finish him off before that. You wanna know my favorite detail of any boss fight in this game? So, this first fight with Riku. This fight seems so hard when you first play the game. I remember watching my friend lose to him 11 times. But the key to this fight is to wait until after he attacks for an opening, and keep track of his auto counter every 4 hits. Yeah, it's that simple. You fight Riku 2 more times in this game, but the second one is drastically different in nature, so we'll skip to the third one. While this third fight has a lot more going on in terms of his moveset, it generally follows the same principle as the one on Destiny Islands.
Don't tell me you're giving up already. My turn. Show me your power. You're nothing. Come on.
Come on!
Come on. Here it comes.
Come on!
Now, I have no idea how intentional this is, but it's genuinely a really cool parallel from both a story and gameplay perspective, since I consider this fight the one that truly settles the rivalry between Sora and Riku. Sure, the second fight is where you prove that you're the one who's truly worthy of wielding the Keyblade, but you had Donald and Goofy helping you in that fight, and you kinda end up slapping him silly. Sure, I know Riku is possessed in this last fight, but that's simply the consequences of his choices. Riku got too close to the darkness, and this was the price. Speaking of which, let's go into more depth about the contrast between Sora and Riku, and what I personally take away from it. In the first part of this video, I drew a lot of connections between childhood nostalgia and developing our sense of adventure, curiosity, etc. But those things largely come to mind because we experienced the game through Sora's perspective. If we look back at this game and really think about things from Riku's point of view, it kinda paints the game's imagery in a whole new light. And darkness. In fact, once you understand Riku, you kinda start to get a vague understanding of what darkness is. We all get feelings of being too old for this shit, no matter where you are in life. Whether you're a kid still sword fighting with your friends, or an adult still living with their parents. I've known adults who don't live with their parents but don't have a driver's license. It's very easy to get stuck in that headspace of wanting to get out of whatever your life situation is at the moment. For Riku, he wanted to get the hell off that island. Normally, stories about wanting to leave it all behind build up to some moral about appreciating what you have and the people supporting you. Some of them try to pull the curtain away from the audience and reveal that the world is actually scary and everyone's selfish. I appreciate that Kingdom Hearts doesn't really take either extreme here. Sora meets bad people and learns about the types of dangers out there, but he surrounds himself with good people like the many Disney protagonists he meets in his journey. Sora's journey is a reminder that there will always be good people out there to give you a hand. Although I will say, I think that Winnie the Pooh guy is taking advantage of him. I wouldn't let Sora hang with him if he was my son. You could literally feed this guy the maximum amount of honey possible, and he'll still ransack his friend's house for all the honey he's got 5 seconds later. Riku's experience demonstrates that there are bad people out there who will use and exploit you. Sometimes in really obvious ways, but sometimes in ways that make you still feel like you're in control. Riku witnesses the heartless and what they're capable of, but he thinks he's above it. He allies himself with literal cartoon villains he knows don't have his best interest in mind, but he thinks he can't be manipulated. He thinks he's in full control. They could have taken this in a really cheesy direction and show Riku slowly turn evil over time and become just like the villains he sides with. Or worse, they could have had Riku actually start to believe Maleficent cares about him and have a moment where she backstabs him. Then the darkness swallows him as he yells, "That wasn't the deal!" But no. The game never at any point portrays Riku as stupid or being naive. Riku knows Maleficent is using him, and only sticks around because it'll get him closer to finding Kairi. Which it does, by the way. Naivete is not a requirement for being duped. and getting duped doesn't necessarily make you stupid. Adults get scammed every day, but that doesn't mean they're all stupid. Riku's character is a cautionary tale that doesn't talk down to you, but lets you know that no matter how old you are, how smart you are, how wary and cautious you are, you'll make mistakes. You might feel backed into a corner. You might get full of yourself. And people can take advantage of those things. Sora, on the other hand, hangs out with Donald and Goofy. He befriends Disney and Final Fantasy characters. He actually engages with the Disney aspects of this universe and takes them very seriously, even in worlds like 100 Acre Wood. Most kids around his age would take one look at this world and complain about how stupid it all is. But Sora is still kind to all the 100 Acre Wood residents. He still takes their problems very seriously and genuinely wants to help them. Sora feels like a teenager who's pretty comfortable in his own skin, regardless of how childish his interests may seem on the outside. Riku treads his path alone for most of the game. Even when he allies himself with the court of Disney villains, it's not like he treats any of them as allies or with respect. He rejects all the stuff he sees as childish and feels like he's outgrown it. The little excursions he had with Sora as a kid, the silly sword fights, and screw helping out these cartoon characters, I'm gonna mess with them. It's not until he finally hits rock bottom and finds himself lost and alone when he finally starts to open up to a certain little mouse character. In later games, we'll get to see the full extent of Riku and Mickey as friends. For now though, this is what we're left with. But the most obvious parallel to draw between Sora and Riku is the struggle between light and darkness. It honestly kinda irks me how the light versus darkness conflict is handled in later games. Hell, in the goddamn mobile games, the darkness is literally just a personified antagonist. I always felt the ambiguity of these forces, or just accepting them as a force of nature, made them more interesting. Later games like Birth by Sleep would start directly associating the darkness with hatred and feelings of rage. And I know, Birth by Sleep takes place before Kingdom Hearts 1, so that mentality would make sense there. But in all the games after that, they just seem to roll with it from there on. For the purposes of this video, I'll primarily stick to how it's used in Kingdom Hearts 1. But the same logic can also be applied to Chain of Memories 2 or maybe even 358 Days. Now I want you to think about this. Does Riku ever look angry when he uses the darkness? Do his actions look like they're rooted in hatred? Even with the villains of KH1, the only one who really seems to get consumed by his rage is Clayton. Most of the other villains seem to just manipulate people into doing bad things, or even indulge in the power of darkness, like Cloud for example. There seems to be more complicated emotions associated with it than just that. So throughout the game, you collect these Ansem reports. Like, genuinely, if you have not gone out of your way to go into the menu and open the journal, these are honestly a good read. You're essentially watching this man who was simply curious at first, slowly descend into madness as he begins to obsess over his research. It's in these reports that we find out how Heartless are made. While the Heartless can occur naturally, Ansem also creates more of them artificially, hence the emblem you see on most of them. It's stated that he experimented on people, which turned them into Heartless. So if we're to assume that Heartless can be created by, okay, let's be real here, torturing people, I doubt losing your heart to darkness simply means turning evil. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I could draw comparisons to a lot of different power struggles. The comforting yet terrifying atmosphere I mentioned earlier, the optimistic lens of childhood versus the cynical lens of maturity, but most importantly, hope in the face of despair. You know, while I was mulling over this topic, I remembered another game I played just last year, Metaphor ReFantazio. In that game, they constantly refer to this magical essence called Magla. It does a lot of things, but one of the things it also does is corrupt both people and the things around it. The source of this Magla is explained to be people's anxiety. And the more I thought about it, the more it started to make sense. Anxiety is the feeling I mentioned when the game forced me to commit to my decisions at the beginning. It's people's anxieties that lead them to lose hope, see the world in a very pessimistic view, and even lead them to do some batshit crazy things. It can be something bad people hold over you to get you to do what they want, or it can just overwhelm you and make you lose your grip. To me, darkness is the anxiety that you can never truly get rid of, but shouldn't let overwhelm you. And light is the determination to push through that anxiety, no matter how much it suffocates you.
Don't worry, there will always be a door to the light.
At least, that's how they could have handled it, or you could just make darkness a villain. Whatever. One last theme I want to cover, but couldn't really fit anywhere else in this video, is departure. Sora and friends make the big decision to leave their home. Riku makes the decision to leave his whole life behind, including his parents. He makes it clear that there's a good chance they may never come back. The denizens of Traverse Town are all people who've lost their homes. The Final Fantasy characters in particular feel appropriately placed here, since they're both separated from their home in a story sense, and a literal sense since they're outside of their games of origin. And said game's events are never mentioned either. You spend the whole game trying to reunite these characters with each other. Sora with his friends, Donald and Goofy with Mickey. In the end, they find each other, but it's only briefly. They forcibly part ways as quickly as they crossed paths. And unfortunately, that's just a part of life we gotta learn to deal with, especially as adults. You will have to leave people. People will leave you behind. And you won't have any idea when the next time you'll see them is. But I swear it gets better. So towards the end of the game, you may remember this cutscene. The unskippable cutscene that cannot be skipped because it's unskippable. For any speedrunners watching, they use this scene specifically to establish that the worlds are going to be isolated from each other once the hearts of all the worlds are sealed. But then Squall and the others give Sora some reassuring words.
We may never meet again, but we'll never forget each other.
Well, if you've played any of the games after this one, you know that's a load of shit. And you know what? That's pretty much how it is in real life too. Look, it's an undeniable fact that people will come and go in your life. People you were once close to might start to drift apart from you. It sucks. But all you can really do is remember that you, as a person, are ultimately shaped by your experiences. So it wasn't for nothing. It never is. But I feel like in this day and age, we have way more resources to maintain long-distance friendships. Just use them. Look, the best friendships are stronger than the borders surrounding our worlds. When you make a truly good lifelong friend, you can be apart for years and still pick up right where you left off the next time you see each other. I remember when I had to move away from my home state. This is where most of my former college friends are. I get to see them, like, once a year at best. But despite how long it's been, going out for ramen, anime sleepover nights, they still manage to feel just the same as always. I mean, hey, could be worse. They could do that shit in Shin Megami Tensei 4 Apocalypse where they interrupt the heartfelt goodbyes to say, "Don't worry guys, we can always talk on our smartphones." But they do be right though, my friends and I literally got a Discord server. You know, despite my admittedly meager collection of games growing up, it still astounds me how many nostalgic memories I've made with these games. It's honestly a shame that so many older games nowadays get written off because of that nostalgic element. I think it's really dismissive to say that any sort of defense for older game design isn't rooted in any sort of logic and is purely sentimental. Don't do that, by the way. It's very unattractive and you are scaring off all the hoes. The reality is that people don't feel nostalgic for game mechanics or weird design choices that we didn't even understand back then. We can have preferences towards certain genres or design practices, but that's not where the nostalgia is rooted. As I've hopefully demonstrated throughout this entire video, Nostalgia is rooted in the memories associated with said thing, not the thing itself. The gameplay isn't what draws out those memories, it's the context of specific moments that do. Your enjoyment, or lack thereof, for a game is based on preference, and there is probably some line of logic behind those preferences, even if I or anyone else disagrees with you. I always make it a point that everything I say in these videos is purely subjective, but I like to think I'm still allowed to make a strong case for my perspective. If you're able to come back to a game years later and still enjoy it, that's not nostalgia. That's a game that withstood the test of time. If you're constantly learning new things about your favorite game rather than just fixating on the few vivid things from memory, that's not nostalgia. That's a game that's always had depth that you've yet to discover until now. Yes, Kingdom Hearts may be a game that fills me with nostalgia, but it's also just a genuinely well put together game. A game that still interests me with its subject matter with a fully developed brain. That's not to say that I'm smart, but my brain's probably not going to develop any further. Yes, nostalgia is a factor that livens the discussion around older games. Videos like this one probably wouldn't exist without that, but that alone isn't enough to earn a game its praise. I have more nostalgic memories of playing Wii Sports Resort and Super Smash Bros. Brawl. I enjoyed those games, but there are definitely things I'd rather play today. It's that drive to explore more of a game and finding more of what it has to offer beyond what it did for you the first time you played. This is probably the make or break deal in whether or not a game even has the potential to remain one of my favorite games of all time. Kingdom Hearts isn't just a timeless window into nostalgic memories, it's also just a timeless game, period. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you all so much for watching. It truly means a lot. I spent the better half of a year working on this project. I really wanted this video to come off more introspective and personable, because I want to start sharing more about myself on this channel. If you'd like to hear more personal stories or see more ambitious projects like this one, consider supporting me on Patreon for just $1. You can pledge more if you want, but really, $1 is worth so much more than you think. Huge thanks and shoutouts to my current patrons. This video would not have been possible without your support. I truly could not be any more grateful. If you plan to stick around for the next video, I'll see you soon.